Among all the major powers in World War II, Japan had a unique military structure. Its strategic aviation fell entirely under the Navy rather than the Army. This shift was driven by the rapid expansion of the Imperial Japanese Navy during the 1930s and the development of a specialized class of aircraft, land-based attack bombers known in Japanese as Rikujo Kogeki Ki, or simply Rikko. In 1932, Rear Admiral Isoroku Yamamoto, then head of the Technical Division of the Naval Aeronautics Bureau, launched an ambitious 3-year plan to achieve technological parity with Western naval aviation. This effort culminated in 1934 with the 9 Shy specification assigned to Mitsubishi. The result was the Type 96 attack bomber, designated the G4M and later codenamed Nell by the Allies. This all-metal, twin-engine aircraft with stressed skin construction and retractable landing gear placed Japanese naval aviation on par with the best in the world. The first production variant could carry a 1,760-pound payload over an impressive range of 1,770 miles. By comparison, its closest German counterpart, the Heinkel He's 111B, carried nearly double the bomb load, but had a maximum range of just 680 miles. In April 1936, during an inspection of the first unit equipped with the new Type 96, Lieutenant Commander Yoshiharu Soga offered his high-ranking guests a crucial warning. Aircraft that seem modern today could easily become obsolete workhorses tomorrow, and development of a successor had to begin as soon as possible. By September 1937, the military issued the official 12 Shy specification for a new land-based naval attack aircraft. Bypassing an open competition, the Navy handed the assignment directly to Mitsubishi. The requirements were absurdly high. Maximum speed was to hit 243 miles per hour, with a maximum range of 2,990 miles and up to 2,300 miles with a full combat load. Payload remained at 1,764 pounds with a crew of 7 to 9 men. Designers were asked to dramatically boost speed and range compared to the Type 96 while keeping the same 1,000 horsepower Kinsei engines. Behind the fixation on ultra-long range lay a very vague idea of how these bombers would actually fight. Kiro Honjo was appointed chief designer. He had designed the Type 96 itself and was Japan's most experienced engineer in multi-engine heavy aircraft. After analyzing the requirements, he reached the only logical conclusion. Meeting the extreme range demand was only possible with a 4-engine configuration. At the very first joint meeting with Navy Command, Honjo sketched an outline of a 4-engine bomber in chalk on the blackboard. Rear Admiral Misao Wada, presiding over the conference, shot the proposal down flatly and ordered the drawing erased. Just like that, the first attempt to build a true heavy bomber in Japan came to an end, a missing capability that would later cost the empire dearly. Interestingly, the Navy soon quietly tasked rival Nakajima with developing a 4-engine attack aircraft based on a secretly purchased Douglas DC-4E. That project, the G5N Shinzon, turned out to be a complete bust, producing only 6 pre-production aircraft used strictly as transports. Boxed in by the twin-engine requirement, Honjo's team faced a major roadblock: where to fit nearly 1,300 gallons of fuel. His solution was integral fuel tanks, essentially turning the wing itself into a fuel cell. The wing was designed around 2 main spars forming a rigid, completely sealed box, where the skin itself formed the walls of a massive fuel tank. Honjo rightly recognized that this layout would make the aircraft extremely vulnerable to enemy fire, and that conventional protected tanks would cut fuel capacity by roughly a third. The Naval High Command dug in. They flatly refused to compromise on range, knowingly accepting all the risks. To hit the extreme performance specs, armor plating, airframe survivability, and crew safety were all sacrificed. Combat over China, where bombers flew in tight formations against weak opposition, seemed at first to justify these ruthless compromises. The conclusions drawn there would later prove fatal. The fuselage was an all-metal, riveted monocoque with an oval cross-section roughly 8 by 6.5 feet, bulky yet streamlined, reminding many of a cigar. Pilots later nicknamed the G4M Hamaki, the cigar, while Honjo's team called their creation Name Kuji, the slug. The navigator sat in the glazed nose, behind him the cockpit, then the commander and radio operator, with a flight engineer and second radio operator aft of the wing, and a fully enclosed gunner's compartment in the extreme tail. A spacious bomb and torpedo bay beneath the center fuselage carried up to 2,200 pounds. A single heavy bomb, 4 550-pounders, 12 130-pounders, or an aerial torpedo. The aircraft carried advanced avionics for its era, including a Sperry autopilot and a Type 90 optical bomb sight. The defining defensive feature was a 20mm cannon in an enclosed glazed tail turret, a direct result of harsh lessons from China, where G4M units proved easy pickings for fighters. The weapon itself, the Type 99 Model 1, was a license-built Swiss Oerlikon FF, and adapting Swiss precision to Japanese manufacturing dragged on for over a year and a half, with jamming actions and overheating barrels. 4 7.7mm machine guns in the nose, dorsal blister, and 2 waist positions rounded out the armament. One of Hanzhou's biggest victories was pushing back against the underpowered Kinsei engines called for in the specs. He insisted on the much more powerful Kasei, a twin-row, 14-cylinder radial Mitsubishi was developing, with a takeoff rating of 1,530 horsepower driving 3-bladed constant-speed propellers. It promised a massive boost across every performance metric. On October 23, 1939, the prototype took to the air from Kagamigahara Airfield north of Nagoya, flown by veteran Mitsubishi test pilots Katsuzo Shima and Harumi Aratani. They noted only minor handling quirks. During the test program, the new bomber reached a top speed of over 272 miles per hour, easily surpassing the specification, while maximum range without payload reached an impressive 3,393 miles. The Naval High Command was genuinely thrilled. However, full-scale production was delayed by a strange detour. Heavy losses of unescorted G4M crews over China in 1940 convinced Naval Command to use the new airframe as an escort fighter, a flying gunship designated G6M1 with a massive ventral gondola of 20mm cannons instead of a bomb bay. Mitsubishi's designers rightly believed a heavily armed bomber could not defend against fast enemy fighters, but the Navy insisted and ordered 30 aircraft. Just as predicted, the concept failed completely. Flight performance degraded from the gondola's drag, and the aircraft could not maintain formation with standard bombers. The Americans would later run into exactly the same problems with their YB-40 and XB-41 escort experiments. Ironically, August 1940 was the exact month the A6M0 flew its first operational mission, solving the escort problem outright. The 30 G6M1s ended their days as trainers and transports. The first production G4M1 bombers rolled off the assembly line in December 1940. The aircraft reached 261 miles per hour and covered 2,616 miles with a full combat load, a combat radius far beyond every other twin-engine bomber of its time, remarkably close to four-engine giants. On April 2, 1941, the G4M1 was officially accepted as the Type 1 land-based attack aircraft Model 11. Japanese engineers made desperate attempts to boost survivability. A carbon dioxide inerting system for the wing tanks proved useless, since even minor damage caused fuel to leak onto the exterior skin. In the spring of 1943, workers began bonding a 1.2-inch sheet of rubber to the underside of the wings as an improvised self-sealing layer. The results were dismal. Cruising speed dropped, combat radius shrank by nearly 200 miles, and the upper tank surfaces remained completely unprotected. Small armor plates added beside the tail cannon protecting the ammunition, not the gunner, could not even stop rifle caliber rounds, and frontline crews usually unbolted them on arrival. In total, 1,170 G4M1s were built. The G4M2, arriving from late 1942, brought 1,850 horsepower Kasei engines with water methanol injection, 4-bladed propellers, a redesigned thicker wing holding even more fuel, and a power-operated dorsal turret with a 20mm cannon. Sub-variants added search radar and heavier guns, and the Model 24T was modified specifically to carry the manned Ohka flying bomb under its belly. Japanese industry produced over 1,100 G4M2S of all versions. Only the final G4M3 of 1944 finally received real armor and properly protected tanks, which gave it the shortest range of the entire family, and only about 90 were completed before the surrender. Total production of all variants reached roughly 2,435 aircraft, making the Betty the most numerous Japanese bomber of the war. The G4M flew its first combat missions over China in July 1941. During Operation Ohka that August, the new bombers revealed an unexpected talent. Their cruising speed nearly matched the Zeros, so G4M crews served as night navigators, leading fighter formations on pre-dawn raids deep into Sichuan. For the bombers taking off from Hankou, the route to Chengdu was longer than a flight from London to Berlin, a striking reminder that in scale and geographic challenges, the air war in Asia was at least as grueling as the battles over Europe. By December 1941, the 11th Air Fleet fielded 216 land-based attack aircraft, half of them G4M1S of the Takao and Kanoya air groups. On December 8th, after thick fog delayed the launch from Formosa, 54 Bettys struck the American airfields at Clark Field and Iba in the Philippines. The timing, by pure luck, was devastating. American fighters that had patrolled all morning were refueling when the bombers appeared. Of 636 bombs dropped on Clark Field, not a single one fell more than 200 feet outside the airfield perimeter. In one day, American air power in the Philippines lost half of its heavy bombers and over a third of its fighters. 2 days later came the mission that made the Type 1 Rikko famous. On December 10th, bombers of the 22nd Air Flotilla caught Force Seed, the brand new battleship Prince of Wales, and the battlecruiser Repulse, off the coast of Malaya at the absolute limit of their combat radius from bases near Saigon. Waves of Nell bombers and torpedo planes crippled the flagship first. Then 26 torpedo-armed Bettys of the Kanoya Air Group arrived. Lieutenant Miyoshi Nobeta, determined to guarantee a hit, pressed to 1,600 feet before releasing half the standard drop distance. The immobilized Prince of Wales took 4 more torpedoes and sank within the hour. Repulse, which had skillfully dodged 15 torpedoes, was finally caught in a pincer attack from both sides at once. In Lieutenant Haruki Aiki's flight, both wingmen were turned into flaming wreckage by anti-aircraft fire, but not before dropping their torpedoes. All 3 slammed into the battlecruiser's port side, and Repulse capsized in minutes. For the loss of 3 bombers, Japanese aviation had sunk 2 capital ships at sea, fatally compromising Singapore and proving the total dominance of air power over the mightiest warships. On December 18th, Iki flew back over the battle site and dropped 2 bouquets of flowers into the waves for his fallen wingmen and for the crews of the sunken enemy ships. The following months were the Betty's golden age. Conquering all of Southeast Asia took Japan just 90 days and cost the Navy only 19 G4 Ms crews, ranged from Singapore to Java to Darwin, sinking the American seaplane Tender Langley and pounding Allied airfields, protected everywhere by ubiquitous Zeros. Lieutenant Hajime Sudo recalled that enemy fighters were terrified of the 20mm tail cannon, made a single pass, then switched to hammering the older, slower Nells, flying thousands of feet below, while his crews were already enjoying ice cream back at base when the Nells were still coming home. The first warning came at Rabaul. On February 20th, 1942, 17 Bettys of the newly formed 4th Air Group attacked an American carrier task force without fighter escort. American Wildcats annihilated them. Lieutenant Edward Butch O'Hare alone shot down 3 and damaged 2 more in minutes. 15 of 17 bombers were lost or wrecked, and 88 airmen died. The tragedy was written off as the inevitable cost of attacking carriers unescorted. Command drew no conclusions about the aircraft itself. Guadalcanal made the conclusions unavoidable. When U.S. Marines seized the island's airstrip on August 7, 1942, 27 Bettys already fueled for another target were thrown against the American fleet 644 miles away. 6 were lost for no result. The next morning, 23 torpedo-armed Bettys attacked at wave height. The escorting screen of cruisers and destroyers shredded them. 17 bombers failed to return, 125 aircrew died, and the only hits were one torpedo and one burning bomber deliberately flown into a transport. Over Guadalcanal, the Betty earned its infamous nickname, the one-shot lighter. A single burst into the unprotected wing tanks turned the long arm of the Imperial Navy into a torch. Crews compensated however they could. They bombed from above 26,000 feet, where moisture froze inside their oxygen masks. Since combat took place over enemy territory and the samurai code made capture unthinkable, downed crews almost always rode their aircraft down. Many pilots deliberately refused to carry parachutes. All too often, the final act of a burning Betty's 7-man crew was a farewell salvo of signal flares fired from the cockpit. At night, Warncase engines droning unevenly over Henderson Field became so familiar that the Marines named the night raiders Washing Machine Charlie. The attrition arithmetic was merciless. On November 12th, 19 of the newest torpedo crews attacked an American convoy, and 14 aircraft were lost, 10 with all hands for 0 torpedo hits. By December, entire air groups existed on paper only. The 4th Air Group alone lost 2 consecutive commanders, 6 senior officers, over 40 crews, and more than 50 aircraft in 7 months. Far from the Solomon's meat grinder, the Betty could still fight effectively where escort was strong. Raids on Darwin in northern Australia continued through 1943. On May 2nd, 18 Bettys bombed the airfield while their 26 escorting Zeros destroyed 14 defending Spitfires without a single loss. On June 30th, 23 bombers wrecked Fenton Airfield, burning 4 B-24 heavy bombers on the ground and knocking out the radar station. However, the daylight raids ended after July 6th, and the night campaign collapsed in November when a single lost aircraft happened to carry both the group commander and his executive officer. The Rikko force had one last victory in it. Off Rennell Island on January 29th and 30th, 1943, veterans drilled in pre-war night torpedo tactics caught the heavy cruiser Chicago at dusk, silhouetted against the sunset while the bombers stayed invisible in the gathering dark. They crippled her that night and finished her the next day, the last time the land-based bombers sank a major warship at anything like acceptable cost. The specialists who could fly such missions were nearly gone, and Japan could not train replacements fast enough. By 1943, the manpower shortage forced crews to be cut from 7 men to 5. On April 18, 1943, the Betty carried its most famous passenger. Admiral Isoroku Yamamoto, touring forward bases after Operation Rikko, boarded a G4M at Rabaul. American intelligence had cracked the Japanese naval code, and P-38 fighters from Guadalcanal were waiting in ambush over Bougainville. The commander's aircraft went down in the jungle with no survivors. Yamamoto died aboard the very aircraft class he had championed a decade earlier. From there, the story is one of acceleration. American carrier strikes wrecked Rabaul and then Truk, where over 300 aircraft were destroyed. In February 1944, the 761st Air Group arrived on Tinian with 24 brand-new G4M2S. The next morning, attacking an American task force, all 24 were shot down without scoring a single hit. During the Marianas Battle that June, the Great Marianas Turkey Shoot, the surviving Rikko units could commit only token forces, and most aircraft were wiped out before beginning their attack runs. By the summer of 1944, the Type 1 Rikko was hopelessly outdated. As its successor, the P-1Y Ginga, reached frontline units, the remaining Bettys shifted entirely to night missions and patrols. The aircraft's final combat role was the grimmest. In 1944, the Navy adopted the MXY-7 Ohka, a rocket-powered, manned flying bomb with a 2,645-pound warhead, carried under a modified G4M2E mothership. The Ohka weighed nearly 4,700 pounds, pushing the Betty to its absolute limit. Even the head of the Naval Air Technical Arsenal admitted the combination had virtually no chance against total enemy air superiority. The first mission proved him right. On March 21, 1945, all 15 Ohka carrying Bettys and their 3 escorts were shot down in 20 minutes, without a single Ohka released. The weapon drew blood only on April 12th, when an Ohka snapped the destroyer Manart El Abeli in two. The price that day was 5 of 8 motherships. Of 7 motherships sent against the destroyer minesweeper Shea in May, 1 returned. In the war's final weeks, 60 Bettys were being converted for Operation Tsurugi, a one-way commando raid meant to land 600 raiders directly onto the B-29 airfields in the Marianas. Allied carrier aircraft burned the assembled force on its airfields in northern Honshu, and the surrender ended the project. The Betty flew one last official mission. On August 19, 1945, 2 aircraft painted entirely white with dark green crosses, per General MacArthur's instructions, carried the 16-member Japanese surrender delegation to Ayashima, en route to Manila. Even that flight was pure G4M. A fuel leak forced one aircraft into an emergency landing in a river mouth on the way home, though no one aboard was hurt. Roughly 2,435 Type 1 Rikkos were built, more than any other Japanese bomber, and they served from the first hours of the Pacific War to the day of the surrender. The aircraft's core weakness was never a mystery. Its staggering range was purchased with unprotected integral fuel tanks, a bargain struck knowingly by a high command that treated crews as expendable. Yet the aircraft itself delivered exactly what was asked of it. In 1941, no other twin-engine bomber in the world could strike warships with torpedoes 1,000 miles from base, and the sinking of Prince of Wales and Repulse changed naval warfare permanently. The G4M story is the Imperial Navy's war in miniature. Brilliant engineering harnessed to doctrine that spent its finest crews faster than any industry could replace them,